The power to move a nation forward takes root in the productivity of business and industries. As your Meralco Corporate Partner, we understand the role power plays in fueling the growth of your business, how it moves, how it brings things to life, how it drives your business, and ultimately, how it plays a role in building a nation. We have evolved from being a power distribution company to a total energy solutions provider.
We value the fact that Meralco has taken a very proactive approach to customer service and given us the ability to provide reliable and sustainable services to our customers, effectively tying our relationship with Meralco to our relationship with our customers.
There is power in partnerships. Partner with us today.
I'm David Saldran. In this edition of Power Ideas, we talk to Kevin Benning, Chief Operating Officer of City of Dreams Manila, about how the integrated resort has embarked on a campaign towards sustainability. You know, in a city known for having one of the world's most spectacular sunsets, City of Dreams Manila is the first integrated resort in the country to harness solar energy in equally spectacular fashion. So, hello there, Kevin. You know, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I would have loved to see in person, physically, how City of Dreams Manila was able to transform the rooftops of your parking buildings to generate solar power. But I guess a virtual tour with you would be the best for now, right?
Hi, David. Yes, it is. You know, welcome to the new normal. We're doing our best to make it work, and I cannot wait to take you on a personal tour of our rooftop when we go back to normal.
All right, Kevin, I'm looking forward to that visit. In the meantime, let's talk about how City of Dreams Manila has made a conscious decision to reduce its carbon footprint, with solar power being one of those initiatives. You currently have, I understand, 3,120 solar panels installed in the rooftops of 2 parking buildings, right? Now, that's the record for the largest installation in Metro Manila.
The amount of power produced by these solar panels is enough to light up 12,000 homes for a year, with an average monthly bill of 1,500 pesos.
That is correct. The City of Dreams Manila is extremely proud to be the first integrated resort in the country to harness solar energy. Now, this project, we invested 76 million pesos at 1.2 megawatts of solar power into this property, maximizing our car park, as we mentioned. It's an extremely important step for us to achieve our goal for carbon neutrality and becoming a zero waste resort. You know, having a clean and renewable source of energy with no waste or emissions is just the right thing to do in our world moving forward.
That sounds really fantastic, Kevin. Congratulations. But I want to know, what are we looking at in terms of savings in power costs?
Oh, we're looking at about 16 million pesos of energy savings per year. That equals about 20% of our hotel power consumption across our 940 rooms. But more than savings, we're looking at the larger picture. As an environmentally responsible business, we must do our share in the global movement to combat climate change, and we want to make a difference and fulfill our social responsibility.
Why did you choose Meralco subsidiary, Spectrum, as your partner?
I was asked this question quite a few times in December when we launched this program and implemented our solar panels. And the answer is very simple. Spectrum provides the best solutions, services, and capabilities in the Philippines in regards to solar and energy saving solutions. You know, on top of that, with Spectrum being a subsidiary of Meralco, who is somebody we've worked extremely closely with since we started City of Dreams, we have a great level of trust in the long-term vision of Spectrum. And something I continue to share with everyone is the speed and efficiency of which this project came together. You know, it was only 4 months from start to finish when we partnered with Spectrum in July of 2019 to launch this fully in December of 2019. I've been working here for 5 years and I've yet to see a project come together as quickly and as well as this one did.
I also understand, Kevin, there are other initiatives within your resort complex which are geared towards self-sufficiency, correct? all of which fall under your Sustainable Dreams program. So tell me more about this program of yours.
Part is our overall sustainability strategy for Meralco Resorts and Entertainment across all of our properties in Asia and Europe. We launched here in Manila the Sustainable Dreams program in 2018. And that's really focused on long-term sustainability initiatives across multiple channels.
Wow, that's an amazing list of programs. And the best thing about it is, you know, these are all long-term programs with long-term effects. So whether there's a pandemic or not, Kevin, like those solar panels of yours, for example, they'll continue to generate power, whether there's a pandemic or not. You know what, as they say in your industry, the house always wins. But at City of Dreams Manila, looks like the environment wins as well.
That's absolutely true, David. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much as well. Kevin Benning, COO of City of Dreams Manila. Stay safe, Kevin.
You as well.
This is David Saldran for Power Ideas by Meralco.
Hello and a wonderful morning to everyone here on the stream. Welcome to our Meralco Power Up Talks webinar. My name is Danny Laurel and I'm so thrilled to be your host this morning. You know, guys, I've been with Meralco. I've been hosting your events for quite a while now, and I feel that every time I host your event, I'm also growing and adapting to the ways that you are doing your business. I feel like I was one of the last host when you were at the Hyatt, and that was still, of course, pre-COVID, and I was able to see everyone physically. I was your host during the first Power Up Talks webinar when all of this virus thing was all up in the air and we didn't know what was going to happen. And today, here we are 7 months into a lockdown, so to speak, at least in Metro Manila, and I'm very excited. I know excited is not necessarily the word we would like to use for this period, but it's also an interesting time because it's a time where we are able to have some data, we are able to make some sense of some new trends, and we are able to take a step back and digest all of the things. So it's not necessarily as chaotic, hopefully, as you know, our previous information was, and I really believe that we will be able to understand things better after this 1.5 hours. So as you may have seen in our invitation, this webinar is really a focus on the economic landscape. So we've already gone through hopefully what was the worst, particularly in our country, and we are trying to make sense of what the future is going to be like. So instead of just, you know, sitting and trying to watch everything unfold, I think it's time to really take action, to take control of the future that is completely in our hands. And of course, you know, there's no way to escape this pandemic. There is, of course, no way to escape any sort of difficulty in our lives and in the history of our world. And what we are trying to achieve is to make something pragmatic out of these difficulties and try to, in a deeper way, understand how we are going to confront such challenges, how we are going to change dynamics, particularly in the ways in which we work and in the ways we are doing business. And this, of course, is how we are trying to accomplish being resilient during this pandemic's challenges. Now, we do need to highlight the fact that experts vary when they talk about what's going to be happening. And, you know, I report this on the news every day, and every day it's a different story from every different facet. Some people are much more optimistic than others. Some are very, very pessimistic. And the bottom line is that we all need to understand that there's no crystal ball, but we all need to be informed about every type of opinion and every type of data that's out there. And the thing that we need to understand is it just takes all of this information. It takes new knowledge, scientific knowledge, to be more confident in handling the problem. The problem is not going to go away, but it's time to learn how to not necessarily deal with its consequences, but also how to thrive and live our lives embracing such consequences. So, of course, this pandemic has changed everyone's ways of work. And I'm very glad to see you all here, let's say, more or less adapted to the new normal, so to speak. personally, I've been broadcasting from home for 7 months, and we have evolved so much from the time that we were, all getting disconnected on stream and having so much issues getting the guests online, trying to convince them that this is how we can broadcast the news. And now it's actually gone into a phase wherein everybody is very used to it, and we're able to maintain broadcasting the news. We're able to keep people informed even from our own homes and in the safety of our own homes. So I'm very glad to be able to also use these sort of skills, this skill set that I just got in the past 6 months or 7 months of being able to broadcast, of being able to keep people involved and engaged, even if they are at home and on their screens, and actually have an intimate discussion. I feel that during Zoom meetings, it's even more intimate. It's really something that you can now, you can directly post questions. I can directly see you guys. You can directly participate. There have been amazing webinars. I've hosted around 50, I think, during this pandemic. There have been webinars wherein we're able to get guests from all over the world, from different time zones, something that we were unable to do before. So I hope you are as excited as I am to be here. I think every time we are in a webinar, and it's tiring, it's still an opportunity to just sit back, relax, and absorb all of the knowledge that we might have not have time to do previous to this pandemic. So I hope that everyone's reception on Zoom is clear and crisp. That's very important for us. So I do suggest you wear a headset, wear your earphones. There will be several speeches here, and we specifically want you guys to be able to absorb all of the knowledge by our keynote speakers. So this webinar will be just around an hour and a half. It sounds long, but it actually goes very quickly. So please try and find a spot that's quite comfortable for you, so that you can focus and even participate, especially later on. We will have a question and answer portion. So anytime, as I mentioned, I think this is going to be a very intimate webinar. It's a private event. It's not a huge gathering. So we would like you to be very involved. Please use the tools that we have here on Zoom. Chat with us, so you can send private messages, or you can also just chat, give your opinions and comments. Use the chat box and use the Q&A. That is, of course, on the bottom of your screens. Please try and introduce yourself so I can acknowledge you properly. Yourself, your name, your company, so that we can also see and thank you for joining us on this stream today. So we will, of course, get to your questions and comments later, but I will be monitoring them as we go along. Now, let's kick off the program, and to officially welcome all of us into this virtual event, please allow me to bring to you the first Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer of Meralco. He joined Meralco over 3 decades ago. His varying assignments prior to his present role included stints in networks and South Business Services. So ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause, please, for Mr. Ferdinand O. Helus.
Rani, pleasant good morning to our valued customers, business partners, and of course my colleagues in Meralco. And thank you for joining us today at Meralco's Power Up Talks on COVID-19 landscape. I hope that you and your family are safe in the face of this pandemic and typhoons. We will all remember this year, year 2020, as a year of unprecedented challenges. So for us in Meralco, first it was the Taal volcano eruption in January, then followed by this pandemic, and then the strong typhoons in October and November. Well, we just finished restoring all of our customers in our franchise, but I think in Bicol, the contingent of Meralco are still in Bicol and Marinduque, helping to restore the facilities and maybe power up the economy of that region to again stand up and be back in shape. Well, as a leader, this pandemic situation is really testing our emotional endurance, our leadership, and mental toughness, and even our physical stamina. Heavy is the burden for the business community and its leaders in terms of the sustaining the economy and saving jobs and lives. So the economic landscape has definitely changed, and with the pandemic continuing to peak in some markets and returning in others, and amidst this uncertainty, companies must now consider how the pandemic advancement is impacting recovery and strategies. So, and now more than ever, we must continue to engage, unite, stand by each other, and collaborate, because it is only through working together in a synchronized manner towards a common goal that we will overcome these hurdles uh, at hand. No? Unity is a powerful tool, of course, and Meralco organized this webinar because no one country, no one company can solve a major crisis without the help of others. So we wish to take this opportunity to thank all of you for your continued support, patience, and understanding as we try to regain our footing in this new world. And I'd like to thank Mr. Rafael Garchitorena for gracing this occasion and sharing with us his insights. No? So with regards to the impact of this pandemic to our economy. No? So the holiday season is upon us, and it is a time of renewed hope and belief that these two shall come to pass. So maraming salamat po, and have a very productive morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ferdinand Helus. As was mentioned, before it was all about how the company can succeed and all the innovations that we were doing. And right now, it's, as he mentioned, all about bayanihan. And, apart from the pandemic, there was already the Taal volcano issue. Meralco is also heavily hit, of course, by the 2 typhoons that just passed by. Actually, this webinar was rescheduled precisely on the back of that issue. They were all hands on deck. So, it's really just about being able to share the burden, so to speak, and to be able to move forward together. Now, the past 10 months has really been about reacting, coping, adjusting to the new normal. I think this term has been overused already, and what we want to be is really just more comfortable, more confident in this world we are living in. We don't want to always think of it as something that will pass. Right now, of course, the quarantine restrictions are slowly easing up. We at least feel that the worst might be over when it comes to these sort of restrictions. And I think people are much more aware and educated of the risks. And it does seem that the risks are going tilted towards the downside, at least when it comes to the viruses. So we are in a state, as he mentioned, in a hopeful state, especially during this Christmas season, especially since 2021 is coming up and we are hoping for a strong rebound next year. And of course, we are looking for the best ways on how emerging businesses can rebuild, not necessarily to fast track economic growth, but rebuild in a sustainable manner and withstand hopefully not future pandemics, but withstand the difficulties or the difficult situation that we will inevitably find ourselves in even after this. So the recovery will be long and will be hard, and we need to be focused more than ever in rebuilding these businesses in order to, of course, bring our country back on its feet. So this morning is going to be a very well spent virtual time, let's say, with all of us. We also have a very special person, or a very qualified resource person even, who can shed light on these topics and answer a lot of our questions, materialize things, make things more digestible, make things more understood, and to share with us, of course, these thoughts and experiences as well on confronting the challenges of this COVID-19 economic landscape. I am very pleased to introduce to you all the Chief Strategist and the co-head of research of Regis Partners Incorporated. Let us all give a virtual welcome to Mr. Rafael Garchitorena.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Danny, and thanks, Mr. Helus, for the introduction. And thanks, of course, to Meralco for allowing me and Regis to give our thoughts on the pandemic. As everyone's mentioned, it's the word of the year. It's been unprecedented, right? And there really is no playbook for this kind of pandemic. Hopefully, we'll find our way out of it sooner rather than later. So if you can cue up the slides, we'll start the presentation. We'll try to get this done relatively quickly to leave more time for Q&A later on. Just very quickly, Regis, we're a stockbroker, so the focus of the presentation deck is typically more stock market focused. So we will talk about the economy and some regional and global trends as well as we go on. Now, just focusing a little slightly on the stock market, we've had a nice rally over the last couple of weeks. We've bounced very nicely from the bottom compared to after the first initial big drop in the stock market. As Mr. Jesus pointed out earlier, there were many challenges even before the pandemic, and we're just now coming out of it. Can we sustain this recent run-up in the economy and in the market is the question that everyone's really asking. The Philippine market has really outperformed in the last couple of weeks, but this is a performance of the Philippines as of early October. We were at the bottom of the pack, but over the last few weeks, we've rallied quite hard, and we're now climbing up in terms of performances in the stock market compared to the region. One thing that does surprise many foreigners is the strength of the peso. We can talk about it later, but basically, a lot of it's down to oil. It's been a big beneficiary for the Philippines. So just a quick helicopter view of our macro view and how it's changed. In April, we thought that it's going to be a few months, and then by this time, tapos na yung virus, but it's still there, right? So we've seen in August, we thought that we will downgrade our economic forecast, but it looks like the economic recovery has disappointed even our expectations at the time. So we just recently reduced our forecasts for the GDP growth, or the contraction, sorry, for 2020. We're now looking at minus 10% GDP for this year to rebound to around 7% next year, which still would put the Philippines at slightly lower than 2019 levels. And it's basically reflected on in our forecast for earnings of listed companies in the Philippines, where we do see a big drop this year, some recovery next year, but not yet back to 2019 levels of profitability. Probably wait until 2022 for a full recovery in profitability. So very quickly, in terms of the rest of the macro view, so yeah, we saw the minus 16.5, was revised to minus 16.9 for the second quarter. The rebound in the third quarter was a bit muted, a bit weaker than we expected. So that we contracted by still 11.5% in the third quarter. And just to put that into perspective, you've seen much more rapid recoveries in other economies, even just within ASEAN. The Philippines is definitely lagging in terms of the recovery. So our recovery is a lot more sluggish than other countries within our neighboring ASEAN neighbors. So can we make up for lost time? What needs to be done by policymakers, by the central bank, et cetera, et cetera? We can get into that a bit later. So the good thing is we are seeing nice sequential improvements, right? So whether it's in imports or exports, we're seeing very nice monthly improvements over the August number is actually down because of the re-lockdown we had. But we are seeing nice recoveries in things like toll road traffic. Meralco's power sales are recovering nicely. Auto sales are bouncing back. Obviously, the recovery is a bit patchier with airport traffic still basically zero, whether internationally or domestically. There's still some that will remain challenged in the near to medium term. I think the one big challenge for us in the Philippines specifically is everyone talks about the Philippines having or being through the world's longest and harshest lockdown, among the, if not the worst. And this is basically reflected in the Google mobility data, right? So Metro Manila is still under GCQ. And if you look at the recovery, we're still sort of 50%, 40% below where we were pre-COVID. And again, this jives with what we're hearing from mall operators, where foot traffic is still only 30-40% of where it was pre-COVID. The obvious contrast is like Indonesia and Thailand, where once they open the economy, dagsaan na ng tao sa mga malls. So their malls are now 95% foot traffic, right? Here we're still at minus 40%. And a good bit of that really comes down to public transport. And many people outside the Philippines don't see this, no? How public transportation in Metro Manila is still severely limited. It's improved, as the chart can show, but you're still only at around 60% capacity for jeepneys. I think buses are at 40, 50% capacity. And even within each vehicle, it's alternate seating, right? So 50% capacity on 60% is basically you're operating at 30, 40% capacity for public transportation. So, you know, even if you open the businesses, if the workers can't get to their work, you can't really get the economy moving. So the question really now is, can we reopen the economy faster? Has the government taken too long? Are they overly concerned about health and safety, if there is such a thing? But as these charts can show, our case count has definitely come down and has been under control. Even if you adjust for the Red Cross issues, our confirmed case count is down to around 2,000, under 2,000 a day. And our death count, while obviously one death is too many, that's been kept under control. Obviously, much better compared to the rest of the world. And I think the more important part here is that hospitals are not overwhelmed anymore, right? So the hospital bed capacity for COVID has really been managed well. If there's anything else, that's one thing we can tip our hat off to the government. So hospital bed occupancy is definitely below 50% and much lower for the ward bed capacity. Now, contrast this with the rest of the world, where in Europe, this is Europe ex-UK, you're seeing cases spike all over the place, right? It's heading into winter. The death count is rising quite aggressively. Everyone's talking about relocking down. So, you know, for them, this is the second, third, fourth wave, depending on how you're counting it. Sa atin, medyo okay pa, touch wood, no? And obviously the US is also one of those disaster cases in how they've mismanaged the COVID crisis. No? So as you can see here, their case count is way higher than it ever was. So it is the second or third wave or just the same big wave, right? So that at least shows that the Philippines, while we might like to complain about our movement restrictions, you know, it's being handled a lot worse in other places, at least on the pandemic side. The good news clearly is that the vaccine has been announced. We have the two big ones were Pfizer and Moderna at 95% effectiveness each. Just announced yesterday, so before this, right after this deck was printed, we saw the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine announcement at 70% effectivity. We already also hear about Russia and China testing their vaccines. It looks like we're there. It looks like there is hope for a vaccine in record time. Typically, it takes 4 to 10 years to develop a vaccine. We did it in 10 months, which is you know, big win for humanity. So we'll see how quickly that gets developed. There are obviously still challenges of producing, shipping, selling. You do have the budget for it. How far are we down the list of buyers of this vaccine? How many of these will need refrigeration, minus 20 degrees centigrade, cold chain, et cetera, et cetera. So that's still a question, but obviously the fact that it's there is already enough cause for excitement. The real question for us in the Philippines is how much damage has been done by the severe lockdowns, right? So we've seen different numbers of unemployment. The PSA data shows that official unemployment number fell to 10%. Underemployment is still about 27%, combined unemployment plus underemployment. The SWS number has it still at 40%. Now, clearly, you know, that can't be sustained. Similarly, for the Google data, is still showing about 40% of people are not reporting to work. Well, we can adjust for work from home, but you know, very clearly, we need to get people back to work ASAP, you know, to get us out of this rut. The other question for us is OFWs. very nicely. We were worried in the May minus 19% number. We've seen a very nice bounce in July, August, September. September number came out plus 9%. So the question really now is, the DFA has talked about 300,000 OFWs being repatriated. How many more have lost their jobs but are choosing to stay in their host countries TNT muna until the economies reopen and get rehired? So, we'll have to watch these numbers very, very closely over the next few months. The other thing very clearly is on the corporates, where you've seen massive cuts in capital expenditures and investments. So, there's a lot of, while we have been able to contain the spread of the virus, very clearly the next phase is to rekindle confidence in corporates, in the government, and obviously in spenders, and of course in employment, right? So we need to shift away from protection to confidence. How long that'll take will be the big challenge for the government and policymakers. So I think the big frustration we've had, and we talked about this now for the last 4 or 5 months, is there's a big frustration in terms of the fiscal response of the government. No? The Bayanihan one was fantastic. There was Ayuda, whether it was the direct handouts, the 5,000 to 8,000 pesos a month for April and May. We had a Dole handouts, but really we haven't seen much since then. Bayanihan 2 was okay, but really didn't give direct support to individual some consumers. And if you look across the region on the bottom part of that slide, we see how it's been, the fiscal response of the Philippines has been among the lowest in the region. So that's really the big frustration we have. And clearly it all comes down to the government's fiscal deficit. And hopefully we get this spending done next year. They're talking about passing the budget very quickly, and hopefully we can get the build program restarted, etc. So just very, very quickly on the central bank. We have the central bank, in contrast, has been very aggressive in its support of the economy. Whether it's policy rate cuts, which we had just last week, the central bank has been aggressively managing the yield curve. The difficulty in the Philippines is, unlike you hear quantitative easing and et cetera in the big economies. In the Philippines, the transmission of monetary policy into the economy is not very strong, right? There's not many people invested in the stock market. The household debt to GDP within the formal banking sector is not very high. So we really need to get the fiscal side going to support to augment the monetary support that the central bank has given. So just very quickly showing the Philippine BSP has shown our own version of QE. The central bank has definitely expanded its balance sheet very, very aggressively, keeping the interest yield curve low to prevent a repeat of the 1998-1997 crisis, where interest rates went up to whatever 30+%. Here we're keeping the rates down, and people are not. Again, like we said, the central bank's moves have been very aggressive. What we really need is the accompanying fiscal response to get the economy off its feet much more quickly. So again, all of this is great for the stock market. We've seen the market, ripping over the last 2-3 weeks since we talked about this QE and DM. So we're now seeing the market rally very hard. Valuations are going quite nicely. And the good thing we have that we like to say is that a lot of foreigners left. So there's very few people left to sell. Nakabenta na lahat, no? So now that things are turning, the level of queries we're getting from our foreign investor clients tells you that this rally might have a lot of legs to go. So despite the fact that we're a bit more concerned on the economic activity and the economic rebound, it looks like the stock market wants to go up. And far be it for us to stand in the way of foreign money coming in to push the market up, and local money as well. The local investors have also been pushing the market up quite nicely. Now, we'll just have a few slides on how we think COVID-19 has changed the way we behave, as Danny talked about earlier. And how many of these things will we want to get rid of? Obviously, we want to meet each other again face to face. But how many of these things have been changed for the good? And there are many things that COVID-19 has highlighted that I think are important to move ourselves forward, and was the nice impetus to get light a fire under our ass, as the saying goes, to get things changed. And for us, we identified 4 big changes. One is ESG. It's a big, broad umbrella. But really, there's a lot of talk now about COVID-19 and all of this crisis, really shining a light on the importance of environment, sustainability, and governance in the way we invest, in the way we build things, in the way we buy things, and the way we sell things, right? So it's doing well by doing good. There's a lot of debate on either side of the conversation, but at least the conversation is happening. Obviously, there's the work from home and study from home. There's e-commerce, and there's some digitalization and big data that is also a big trend. We'll just blast through each one of these very quickly. So this just shows you how important ESG has become, right? According to Morningstar, the guys that track these fund flows, there's already over $1 trillion $1 trillion with a T, not with a B, in funds going into ESG funds, right? So people look for sustainable energy, smart grids, anything sustainability focused, governance, environment, whether you're talking about meat substitutes or electric cars or recycling, whatever it is, right? There's a lot of money. So this is people putting their money where their mouth is. And I think this is a huge trend that is important not only for people looking at the stock market, but people looking at investing in new technologies, whether it's in the power generation side or in packaging or many other things. I think this is a huge trend that is not going away anytime soon. So that's one. On the work from home side, very clearly we've seen these are numbers from the telcos, PLDT and Globe, and we're seeing a huge, as you'd expect, broadband subscriber additions have just gone absolutely through the roof. We saw more than 1 million new broadband subscribers in the first 9 months of the year. Definitely much more than we've seen in the last 2 years. No? So the question really here is okay, fine. Again, we all want to see each other again. We want to go back to the offices, but maybe it's changed the way we work. Maybe you can work from home once, twice a week. What does that do for traffic? It's probably a good thing. But what does that do for office demand? And even for schools? Does all of a sudden distance learning becomes more available, and people are now able to access modules from Harvard, Oxford, and whatever it is, right? So just the birth opens up a wide range of possibilities. We also even hearing about doctors doing virtual visits. So hindi na yung aantay ka ng 3 oras for the doctor dahil stuck siya in traffic, di ba? So there are definitely positive things happening here. Apart from that, so on the e-commerce side, I've stolen a couple of slides from some studies online. No? So very clearly, as you can see in this UN study on COVID effect on e-commerce, you're seeing developing economies are changing much more rapidly. So in this slide, you see China, Turkey, Brazil, and Russia being big changes in terms of internet use and e-commerce use. And you see that as well. So I think the other point to make is that how this is changing the way people do business. We've seen how technology can be a force for good. Maybe it's bad for the incumbents, maybe it's bad for mall operators, maybe it's bad for the big department stores, but it might be good for the small businesses who all of a sudden, I don't have to drive from Alabang to Quezon City to buy my favorite cake. There's a Lala move that I can get. All of a sudden, for small businesses, there's a way to scale up without having to pay lots of rent, lots of stores, et cetera, et cetera. So it's definitely accelerating the change in the way people behave. And finally, just looking at how the e-wallets have changed, no? And this is one thing we've been saying for years and years and years. Is tayo nagpasimula nung e-Pimpasa load, and yet we're one of the first. That was in 2003. And yet we're lagging in terms of e-wallets and mobile money payments. I think the COVID crisis has accelerated that change. I think it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I think the last data points we got from GCash and PayMaya is that transactions are up 3 to 5x year on year. Globe is talking about hitting 1 trillion pesos worth of transactions this year. And how this again changes the way businesses interact, how people interact with each other, can only mean good things for the future. I'll stop there, and happy to join you guys for the Q&A a bit later on.
Thank you so much, Sir Rafa. That was really enlightening, and I have a lot of questions, personal questions, but I'm going to leave it to the floor first because I actually want to clarify so many things about your presentation, which has been, of course, very insightful. And, just for everyone, start sending in your questions in the chat box. I'm going to get to that in a few minutes, just to maybe kick off how we can start this conversation going and just to highlight some takeaways that I had from your presentation. So you were basically saying that, let's say, the worst is over when it comes to the health crisis, in terms of, at least right now, in terms of us having been able to keep those numbers low. Big question I have on that is, can the data be trusted right now compared to how we were doing before? Okay, so maybe we can keep that in mind. Another you were saying is, of course, fiscal policy has been lagging, but at the same time, what more could we have done without us having to bear the tax burden, without our businesses having to be taxed further, without us having to get debt that we might not be able to afford, and are we still able to have this fiscal spend higher and manage to maintain that infrastructure play that the administration had so needed to desperately revive this economy? And you were also mentioning about, the monetary policy being very preemptive, a lot of liquidity in the system, so much, in fact, that it's not been sapped out. How is consumption going, and what's going to be happening, especially in this last quarter of the year? What are we going to be seeing? Are people, keeping the money in cash in their pockets because they are locked down, because there's no public transport? Or is it really a lack of confidence in the economy, a lack of, trust that they're going to be having jobs by next year, that they can afford those mortgages they have, right? So is the spending lockdown related, virus related, or business confidence related? So a lot of those things. I also wanted to highlight, by the way, a very interesting point that you've made on the trends coming forward, ESG. That was my PhD topic 10 years ago, 12 years ago, on the 2009 crisis, which I was involved in as well. I saw, people losing their jobs all over Europe, and ESG starting to get, it was the key trend, it was the hot thing. And here we are again in another crisis. People had forgotten that sustainability path na naman, and then finally another crisis comes, and then people start doing that. So at what point can we say that, okay, these things are the new thing, right? It's really gonna change na talaga. That's gonna be the new trend. And to what extent is it a temporary thing that people are excited about during crisis periods? All right, so thank you so much for that. We're going to get back to you and have a lot of questions from our audience as well, but we also want to join in our panel Meralco's head of the Private Sector Relationship Management Group. Let's please welcome Mr. Marvin Hovero. You will be answering any questions you have as well related on how Meralco is in particular managing this new normal, let's say, in this difficult situation for the private sector. And likewise, we have with us, she is the Assistant Vice President and Head of the Public Sector Relationship Management Group of Meralco. So a warm hello to Ms. Jer Solido. Hi, ma'am, and good morning.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Thanks,
okay,
Danny.
Just checking that you guys are all on the stream here. All right. So I am going to right now be opening our chat box here. I'm receiving all of these messages. Maybe we'll kick off with Sir Rafa. Okay, this is of course a very broad question. I think you should kick off with that. how optimistic are you for a global recovery, and what timeline can be considered? I mean, when you talk about global recovery, you can recover in 10 years, right? So how optimistic are you that we will be seeing this recovery anytime soon?
Wolf. Okay. So I think you're hearing a lot about in the past you were talking about a V-shaped recovery or an L-shaped recovery, a U-shaped recovery. May bago na namang letter ngayon. Everyone's talking about a K-shaped recovery.
Oh, wow.
And basically what that means is that unlike, for example, post 97, in Asia, and then post 08, 09 for the West, when the markets turned and the economies turned sabay-sabay lahat. I think this time around, as I pointed out in one of the slides earlier, the recovery will be very patchy. You won't see the industries and countries recovering at the same pace. It'll be uneven, inconsistent. I think there are definitely some countries like China, Taiwan, Korea, Japan that were very, very well prepared, that dealt with the crisis very, very well. They're seeing a new round of infections, but the economic impact, they've managed to balance the health and economic issues very, very well. There was one comment made by Mohammed Al-Aryan, one of the big, I'm sure you've interviewed him before. But basically, with the difference, for example, with the East and the West, is in the West you have to balance three things. In Asia and much of the East, you're really just talking about health and the economy. In the US and Europe, you're talking about the health, the economy, and personal freedom. The US still saying, I don't want to wear a mask, right? So it's kind of ridiculous. So anyway, I think it'll be much more difficult for them to recover. Let's see how if Joe Biden is able to convince people to put their masks on. But no, I think that's going to be a big challenge. I think the whole world recovery will probably happen gradually over the next 2 years. But like I said, it'll be very interesting to see how the different countries and different industries recover at very, very different paces. Even if the airports open up, how confident are you that you want to travel with someone who hasn't had his vaccine shot, right? So I think a lot of that, again, a lot of it will depend on the logistics and the ability of the vaccine manufacturers to deliver those vaccines to different countries on time. Have we, as the Philippines, has our government been able to? Where are we in the queue of the vaccine recipients? How quickly can we get it? How quickly can we disperse it? How quickly can we administer it? So there's obviously hope, right? Obviously, we've seen the floor for many of these economies, including the Philippines, and the vaccine does bring a lot of hope that we won't, even if we do go back into lockdown, the likelihood, the increased likelihood is that we will get this done in the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, so thanks for that. I guess your main point here is that if there are ways to actually get better, as we've seen in some economies that have successfully managed to not only turn around but even stage growth compared to pre-COVID levels. So it's not an impossibility, but as you mentioned, there are many moving parts in many different areas, mostly linked to how people even behave, diba? And how people are adjusting to this and whether they're embracing these lockdowns and safety standards or not. Okay, sir, I want to shift over to Mr. Marvin and just discuss, building on Sir Rafa's topic on the focus is now on sustainability. The focus is on could we have prevented this in the first place if we had, better safety standards to begin with, better health standards, perhaps even better environmental standards? The last typhoon has shown how climate change is even accelerating the pandemic spread, right? In a very simple example of a typhoon. And this is a question from Ricky from the audience. How can we use power to help build or rebuild, so to speak, a greener global economy after this crisis?
Thanks, Danny. Actually, The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a toll on our lives, livelihoods, and economies globally. However, it somehow enabled us to catch glimpse of a better world. Meron cleaner air, blue skies, reduced emissions, besides reinforcing yung value of public health. Even some of us are really updated sa Netflix, K-dramas. Now, in order for us to recover or bounce back, we simply cannot afford to return to business as usual and continue to pursue a high carbon and sustainable growth in template. Rather, a global recovery measure should target a green and resilient future. That is why Meralco has taken a role to provide counsel to our customers, to guide them in making informed energy-related decisions, to bring about our energy products and services that change the way we conduct our businesses and lives in our lives, especially in this new normal. Also, our energy supply situation has been unable to keep up with the demands of the thriving economy. Unless more power plants are built quickly, the energy efficiency and conservation law may just be the strategy in this new normal. So to create awareness and aid our customers in preparing for the impact of the EENC law, we actually organized a webinar this coming Thursday on November 26 and invited DOE to be our speaker and give us a refresher on these salient points of the law. Thanks, Danny.
Sir, I'm just going to jump off on that now since we're on that topic already of which sources of energy. And this is from an anonymous person, but this has been a topic of contention pre-COVID even. Clean energy, when we talk about UN, Sustainable Development Goals, does this mean we should forego coal? Can the Philippines afford transitioning totally into clean energy from solar? And as Meralco, can you actually assure us that if we do that, the rates of electricity will not go substantially higher?
Yes, Danny. Actually, Meralco has some power supply agreements that cater to what we call clean coal, using new technologies for cleaner emissions. At the same time, we have a subsidiary, Spectrum, which caters to installation of solar panels that can help with our carbon credits.
Okay, so some initiatives already in place and possibly to be accelerated because of this impending crisis. Let's move on, sir, to the next question here. This one is for Ms. Jer. This is from Jaime Reyes from the audience, and it touches upon the topic of Sir Rafa, that our next trend, it's not really a trend, it's a forced trend, so to speak, of working from home, diba? So we've all been thrown into this. How has Meralco and its subsidiaries, how did Meralco prepare for all of its employees going back to work? I'm not sure if he means Meralco lang, or how have you also assisted perhaps other companies and your clients in helping their employees go back to work?
Okay. Well, as you all know, we were all on lockdown since March 16 onwards, but with the National Task Force on Emerging Infectious Diseases, or COVID-19, Meralco opened its doors. Its business centers started resuming operations in May. So to be able to protect our customers as well as our employees, of course, there were acrylic barriers in our offices, and we had some virtual conversations between Meralco and its customers. So some of our employees were working from home, but virtually a customer could converse with that Meralco employee through a laptop in the business center. What else? How else have we helped our customers? Well, our subsidiary, MServe, offers this indoor air quality solutions, which Meralco in our headquarters in Meralco Center, Pasig, Ortigas, has been already using. So, of course, we use this IV or IV lights method. So every end of the day, that they disinfect our offices. Of course, we employ the usual temperature checks and the usual alcohol in our lobbies. So, and of course, before employees go to work, we all have to undergo rapid testing. So, this ensures that none of us none of us are infected and cannot cause infection to our customers. So that's about it.
I actually appreciate it. I think one of your members here in our team had a sticker, an orange sticker that means that she was tested. I think this should be best practice. It's such a simple thing to be done that doesn't seem to be done elsewhere. So congratulations on that. Jumping off on that point, Sir Rafa, can you comment on at what extent, and this is also related to an anonymous question, how is the Philippines doing in terms of attaining or reaching the UN SDGs? And just, generally, you were talking about how people are more concerned about environmental, social, and governance, ethics, ethics, if you can call it ethics, in specific companies. Markets are looking at that. Investors are starting to look at that. Has the change really been material when we are talking about Philippine companies?
Slowly. I think the companies are just now, as you point out, it's been around for a long time, but it's really just now that the companies are realizing how important ESG is. And I think the market does play an important role, right? So it's very clearly rewarding companies that have strong ESG. You brought up coal earlier. There are many. I think there are no more mainstream global funds that are allowed to even invest in coal mining. Some can still do coal power, but definitely no more coal mining and stuff like that, right? So the market is forcing the changes. It's going to happen a bit more slowly in the Philippines. I mean, there's the opposite side of the argument where I think the term is kicking the ladder, right? So while the president talked about this climate justice, where the developed economies have already gotten themselves to that point, using dirty coal, using whatever. And now they're saying, bawal na sa inyo. Diba? So, parang, teka lang, diba? Paano yun? So, it's easy for them to make the shift to more expensive power. For us, it's much more difficult. You cannot force you can, but it's difficult to force the emerging economies to take on these technologies that do cost. Now, the good thing is hopefully it can be done gradually. And like I said, the market is at the very least forcing the way companies and governments start thinking about things. There are green bonds, blue bonds. We have to think about sustainability, whether it's climate resilience, whether it's fisheries management or agricultural swine flu management or whatever. It's brought the conversation to the front instead of on the back. Right? Even this time last year, talking to listed companies, like, oh yeah, we have someone doing sustainability and whatever. But it's like, we had literally just yesterday, I had a question from an investor asking about ESG practices. And the company's bang, yep, there's this one person in charge of it. Yep, here's the questions, here's the answers, here's the PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully, hindi lang PowerPoint presentation, but I think very clearly the mindset and the questions of ESG and the US SDG are now the front of the conversation, not the back of the conversation. At the very least, if only for that. Yeah.
Okay, and the question is, will we be able to internalize that, it's something necessary and not something we can do and we can afford it, right? Especially during these periods, can companies afford it? Is a good question. But let's shift over to Sir Marvin on that topic and still addressing, power equity, power sustainability, the availability of power vis-a-vis the issues of climate change that our country is facing. And we saw this, and this is a question from Ms. Ia. How does Meralco address all the power outages during and post-typhoon? A lot of areas have suffered long hours of no power. Perhaps, sir, you can connect that in a little bit, in a way, with what Sir Rafa has mentioned, that, it's really about being able to be preventive as well, that these things don't happen rather than reactive.
Yes, actually, we have expedited restoration of outages that was brought about by Typhoon Ulysses. Even during the Super Typhoon Rolly, part of in the spirit of Bayanihan, Meralco have dispatched crews to help our kababayans in Catanduanes to help expedite in restoration their power also.
So thank you, sir, for that update. Of course, it's such a hard situation. Of course, these things are not something we wish on anybody. And you guys are doing your best. We saw a lot of the frontliners, of course, working round the clock on that issue. Let's talk about the economy and take a step back and just go back to Sir Rafa's, slides here on whether or not the government is doing enough, which is a question that we've been all asking. For Ms. Jer, what are your insights on that? This is from an anonymous person on the stream. What are your insights on how the government should support businesses to make a gradual economic recovery? What exactly needs to be done?
Well, with our experience now, with our relationship with our government customers, so we were actually being pushed to start on the build project. So although some of our own employees and contractors did not feel safe enough to go back on the field, but we were being pressed by government. So I think government helped in that aspect by making sure that government would spend for these infrastructure projects. So as a matter of fact, just during this pandemic period, governments were able to open a number of their infrastructure projects, such as the NLEX Harbor Lake. And then we all know that the Skyway 3 from Buendia to Balintawak has already been completed and will be open to motorists by December. So I think in that aspect, as far as spending in order to spur the economy, I think government is cognizant that this has to be a priority to be able to, for our economy to recover. Government has to spend more.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Jer. Hand in hand with consumer consumption, of course, government expenditures here, especially in the infrastructure front. This, of course, goes back to you, Sir Rafa. This is a question from Martin. And also, I want to just encourage the audience to keep your questions pouring in. Very, very interesting points that you guys are making. Very incisive questions. Rafa, what is the most important action, or what actions can we take to prevent a deeper economic collapse? You mentioned already in your presentation the fiscal needs to catch up. How exactly should this happen?
From my perspective, anything. There's no magic bullet. Different countries have done different things. There are direct handouts, like in the U.S. There were direct loans to businesses. Well, loans, right? They were given a loan, but they didn't have to repay them if they retained X% of their staff, etc. Different countries have been doing things like loan guarantee programs, not just for MSMEs. There's lots of things that can be done. And I think the frustration for us is medyo hilaw nga yung Bayanihan 2 specifically. I think Bayanihan 1 was good. But Bayanihan 2 was a little bit medyo mahina yung fiscal impulse. No? So what else can they do? I think it's a big challenge. You're right. You brought it up earlier, right? And again, bear in mind, you have to understand, much as we like to criticize the government for not doing enough, you're absolutely right. They have to make that decision to balance between short-term and long-term. As you rightly point out, if they did 2 or 3 more rounds of ayuda, wow, how will we pay for it later on? At the same time, you have people saying, oh, bring down the taxes of corporates, bring down the taxes of VAT, bring down this, bring down that. Where will the money come from for future, right? We want universal health care, we want infrastructure, but we also want lower taxes. Parang teka lang, diba? Medyo hindi pwede yun. So you're absolutely right. I think at this stage, we're already at the end of the year. Our big hope is that our friends in Congress and Senate move expeditiously to pass the budget. Hopefully, we don't have the same problem as 2019 when we started only spending the budget in April. That will be an absolute disaster. We need to get that money down into the agencies, spent, build the infrastructure, hire people. We need to get that downward spiral back into a virtuous cycle, not a vicious cycle. And really, again, there's no formula, right? But you need to get people spending again. To get people spending again, you have to get people hired again. You can't buy stuff if you don't have a job, right? So that you pick your spot which is why we say we really don't care where it starts. It's almost anywhere. You need to build confidence. You pick one part of the economy that you think is the highest multiplier effect in terms of building confidence. But essentially, in the end, you need to get people hired again. You need to get companies confident in spending again. It's to get that virtuous cycle back. Without which, if we do nothing from here on in, then your unemployment doesn't move. And that's really the biggest tragedy, is that it has hit the lower end of the spending class more than it has us.
Okay, so we just need one cog to move, and then the rest of the wheel might actually
anything.
Anything. Good point. But also, as you mentioned, it's not, maybe if we don't have the cash there, at least the efficiency in cash spending should be there, right?
Yeah,
Nevertheless,
the stuff is huge, and it's true. The build is absolutely fantastic. Just get it up and running, get people hired, get the economy moving again.
Okay, and on that note, there's another question here from Daryl, which I personally like because I watch the markets every day. He asked, the retail and office sectors are the hardest hit, obviously. So, tenancy rates are dropping. Retail has been really, really hard hit, directly hit. But the stock market is still positive about big property players. I would say, at least in the last month. In November, you've seen quite a surge in the property space. Any explanation? Do you feel that there's a disconnect, so to speak, in the movements of the markets and in the real economy? Or, is this, sentiment driven by the vaccines, by Joe Biden winning? Or is this, as you mentioned, it already has legs? And to what extent can you relate that to the hardest hit sectors?
Yeah, no, I mean, so yes, I think they were hardest hit. Incrementally, you are seeing improvement. So in retail specific, I think in the second quarter, it was maybe on average 10-20% foot traffic. Now it's 40% foot traffic. I think the latest data points are October, November are hitting 50%. And more importantly, I think 90% of the stores are open. And despite the fact that foot traffic is only about 40, 50, 60%, we're hearing anecdotal evidence that the revenue generation is already at 70, 80%, which again brings us back to the wonderful thing called the internet, right? It definitely helped the tenants get back on their feet. Clearly, the you know, the potential downside risk for the mall operators is how much of this behavior will become permanent now. How many people will just stick to Shopee and Lazada and not go to the malls anymore, or go to the malls, look at the thing, and then buy it online dahil may 11/11 sale or whatever, right? So that's going to be a big challenge for them. The market moving ahead is very clearly partly money driven. As you said earlier, the central bank has poured a boatload of money into the system, same as the Fed, same as the ECB, same as JGB. So everybody's been pouring money into the system. And you know, when you have that much money in the financial system, your deposit rates are now down to almost zero. You know, that money will move initially into money market funds and then later move into equities as you look for better returns. But you're also right that, you know, the market is typically a discounting mechanism. So the markets tend to look out ahead, sometimes 6, 12, maybe now even 24 months ahead, looking forward to the eventual recovery in whatever shape or form it might take. But yeah, so very clearly, the market's already getting very positive. You know, no one's looking at 2020 earnings anymore, right? Some are even looking beyond 2021 earnings. So yeah, there will always be a disconnect. The markets tend to discount ahead of time the impact of negative and positive. So yeah, we're quite bullish on it. It's weird to have the two disparate thoughts in your head, right? You're more concerned over the real economy, but you're actually much more positive on the market.
Okay, at least there is one space wherein you can still forecast some positive earnings there in the future. Of course, it's beyond the 1 to 2 year mark also, and it's for eternity, let's say. Okay, let's talk about the incentives and whether or not, you had already mentioned, Rafa, the fact that, okay, should we be cutting taxes, corporate taxes? Should we be actually taking away incentives right now? And this has been, a question. I think the Sitira bill has been changed so many times. Create bill na siya. So many issues on that, especially when it comes to the PEZA side. This is from Mr. Noel Pabilona. Your fearless forecast. This is for Sir Marvin on PEZA incentives. Will the government finally pull the plug during these times? I don't know if you can say whether they will or they will not, but perhaps should they or should they not during these times of lingering pandemic and, of course, low manufacturing activity.
Thank you, Danny. Noel, thank you for that question and belated happy birthday. Actually, Meralco fully supports some of the pronouncement of PEZA. There are some like the electronic industry, which is being led by SAPI, and I think they're lobbying for the great bill. And we are hopeful that investment would come in. Of course, the more investment, more jobs for us, and at the same time, it would equate to a higher sales also for Meralco. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Maybe we can jump back to Rafa on the PEZA issue. So given our economic status here in the Philippines, and that's one of the things that we need, foreign locators to be coming back in here. It's something that SAPI had already mentioned is an existential threat to society, to their business, rather, if I can quote them. Even in other countries. So has this pandemic potentially affected investors looking to expand here in the Philippines? And how important is it for us to be keeping such incentives and, let's say, a lower tax base for foreigners?
Okay, there's many sides to that, many facets to that question. I guess it's important to note that, as you saw, point out, Sitira, Package 2, Create, whatever they call it now, doesn't take away the incentives. It makes it, what's the word that Carl Chu uses? It's time bound and performance based, right? So instead of may forever pala in terms of fiscal incentives.
Yeah.
Make it time bound. It makes a lot of sense, right? I think there's nowhere else in the world where the incentives are forever. And to be fair, there have been a number of exporters who abuse the current excuse me PESA incentive. So I think if you look at the way it's currently structured, there's a little bit more tax that they're paying, but not a lot more. I think when I used to speak a lot to the German Chamber of Commerce, for example, and the first few versions of the law, the bill at least, were very punitive against exporters. Parang the Create bill as it's currently written seems acceptable to most exporters. We need to do a lot more though. Fiscal incentive is only, not even half the equation. Make a quick dig at Meralco, but we still have the most expensive power in Asia. So how do you do energy intensive manufacturing? You can't. We have not naman high. We used to have a high minimum wage compared to the rest of Asia. But just to put things into perspective, I think the minimum wage in India is like $3 a day. We're at 10, right? So how do you compete? Then there's the peace and order situation. There's the there's the governance issue. So there's many facets. I think the Create bill by itself is probably a good thing. One of just this morning's news, I think the Korean trade delegation was talking about the high level of corporate tax rate. So if you can bring down your corporate tax rate and increase a little bit on the fiscal incentive side, I think it's a win-win for everybody. In the end, there's one more small pasingit here. Maybe we stop looking too much to foreigners. There's enough capital domestically, and I think that's one thing we've been advocating as stockbrokers is, the amount. We're not anymore in the 80s, 90s where we were so dependent on FDI, on foreign investors, even in the stock market. There's a lot of big companies locally. There's a lot of money locally. A lot of that money can be put to good use for domestic investment. But yeah, no, I think in general, the fiscal incentives that we have today are clearly not working anyway. They've been working for the last 20, 30 years. They need to be updated. Yeah.
All right, so thank you for that good point. I never really thought of it that way, that now we can actually stand on our own. I was thinking that, the more global the world becomes, the more reliant we are on all of these other countries to sustain our businesses. But anyway, very, very interesting point. Maybe I'll take one more question, which is on the role of banks for you still, Rafa. This is from an anonymous participant. What role will rural banks play in the new normal with a more aggressive push towards fintech solutions? I think, we've been looking at this space quite cleanly, because this is a space that was very niche before all of this, COVID thing happened and people started digitally transacting. Is this the time for the smaller banks to, create a band-aid solution, or is this the time that they're actually going to be able to shine, or will that be swallowed up, so to speak, by the bigger banks?
It's something I've been waiting for the last 5-10 years. You see microfinance and digital finance happening in many other parts of the world. Again, I brought this up earlier. We had Pasaload in 2003, and yet we're still not progressing fast enough, in my view, in terms of digital adoption. And I think digital money and e-wallets and e-transactions and mobile banking are absolutely critical in terms of financial inclusion. So, you have the stats are pretty staggering. I think only 1/3 of Filipino adults even have a bank account, right? You have household debt. So consumer loans within the formal banking sector is only 10% of GDP. And it's not real, right? There's no motorcycle financing happening in the banking sector. Microfinance is barely 1%, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the role of rural banks, I don't know if it's rural banks is the right place to go, Maybe it's going to be this new fangled online bank license. Yeah, so Union Bank is doing phenomenally well.
I meant neobanks.
Sorry, neobanks. Oh, neobanks. Yeah, no, neobanks, online banks, all these guys. So yeah, maybe you're right. I think there is definitely now technology has created space for smaller niche banks to compete without necessarily having to have the huge capital outlay of 2,000 branches, right? It can be done now. And yeah, I mean, anything that gets more people into the formal financial sector is going to be awesome, right? You don't want people paying 5, 6. Even getting them on a credit card charging 40% is a huge improvement over 5, 6, right? So yeah, I think it's hugely transformative. Whether the rural banks or the neo banks or online banks or whatever, it's all good, and we need to get people onto the formal banking sector to bring down the cost of financing. It's not just the big corporates like Meralco benefiting from cheap loans, right? We need to bring that down all the way to the average Filipino.
Okay, and as you pointed out, it wasn't necessarily in your presentation, but we're actually having one of the biggest mobile phone penetration in the world. Facebook hours, being used here. There's a huge untapped market for these sort of services. It's just a matter of getting that on board at this moment that we really need it. Okay, let's. I have a couple more questions, I think, before we need to wrap up. But let's move back to the Meralco side here, which of course your role is very much ensuring power security. This one, perhaps, Miss Jer, Mr. Marvin can take it, and you can both add to the answers. Let's kick off with Sir Marv. How Meralco is making more investments in renewable energy, and sourcing portfolio is also showing this. You had mentioned that earlier on. The goal of Meralco is to ensure that we are able to. Okay, so this means balance in our sourcing strategy. Maybe the question here, and not too sure what the question was, but basically, what is Meralco's plan to convert street lights, industrial parks, things on the road to adapt towards clean energy? Are there specific projects that you are now highlighting apart from just the sourcing of the renewable energy?
For the street lights, actually we have already converted our street lights into LEDs. You can see in along NLEX, the street lights are already installed. There are LEDs, and one of our subsidiaries, MServe, made that possible. And we have another subsidiary, Spectrum. They had a project in Palawan wherein they use a smart street lights. It consists of having a dashboard of controlling on and off. It enables the government to save a lot. And as with regards for the power supply, we are also venturing into renewable energies as spearheaded by our subsidiary Spectrum.
Okay, sir, maybe related to this, there's one specific company that has now been in the news as of late, and that, Sir Rafa can comment on that as well, but AC Energy, they have been planning, and that has been they're on us, basically. They're already saying that they will be disposing of their coal assets, shifting towards renewable energy. How much of today's power supply actually comes from coal, and how will Meralco, as a power distributor, be impacted by this direction? Is that a big chunk of the pie?
For Meralco, basically because of course using coal is much cheaper. We do have some supply coming from plants using natural gas, and Actually, Meralco is increasing its renewable energy portfolio within the next 2 to 3 years, which is part of our sourcing most of the cost-effective options.
Okay, Ms. Jer, maybe you want to quickly comment on that to perhaps just give a point on how you believe Meralco will ensure in this most difficult period where everyone is working from home, where businesses are much more reliant. I have to say that during the day that there was a typhoon, there was no power. I could not deliver the news. As everybody else, broadcast was off. Nobody could. We couldn't do webinars. How can you ensure, what is the plan here to make sure that people, for as long as this lockdown needs to continue so that we can get back on our feet, that we will have reliable and stable sources of energy to be able to do our jobs safely?
Well, yes, that's a very relevant question. So right now, Meralco is striving to get back to business as usual. But of course, we know that it cannot be back to the way we used to do things. But of course, we still have a lot of customers applying for electric connection, and our group will strive to serve its commitments to be able to energize these customers. Of course, Meralco is also continuing to beef up, so to speak, or continue to upgrade its facilities to make it reliable and more flexible. Looking back at the recent typhoons that hit us so close to home was Ulysses. We all experienced the power interruption. So we are trying to shift to a smart grid, which will be able to help the grid communicate to our system control, so we know where the trouble lies without really having to send out a lot of our crew to check it out physically on site. So I just like to mention, I failed to answer you. Another government initiative is really to make sure that our marginalized sectors get electricity. So we still have quite a number of households, maybe around 1,200 households, which we've recently energized as mandated by the Department of Energy. So that's what we've been doing. Apart from areas which were severely flooded and which would cause hazards or safety risks if we tried to bring back power, all other sectors which experienced interruption, I believe were restored in a timely manner. So that remains to be our mandate. Of course, we have to admit that without us being able to serve electricity, our business will not be viable too. So, but looking at the customer side, yes, we strive to keep our electric distribution system as reliable, flexible, and resilient as possible.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that's a good way to close off this session. I mean, as you rightly mentioned, it's not just about our businesses getting back on our feet, our markets performing better than expected, or people being able to work from home, but even those marginalized, specifically living in other parts of the country where there's still no access to power, the recovery needs to be equitable on all fronts. So thank you so much. It has been a very enlightening panel, and thank you very much to our participants for all of your questions, not Q&A questions. I've learned a lot, and so thank you so much. That was, of course, Ms. Jer Solidum and Mr. Marvin Jovero from Meralco, and of course our main speaker, Mr. Rafael Garchitorena. So thank you, guys. And before we formally end, I would, of course, like to close the session with some remarks from our Vice President and Head of the Corporate Business Group of Meralco, Ms. Maria Cecilia M. Domingo.
Thank you, Danny, and thank you, Rafa, for that insightful talk. It has truly widened our perspective in dealing with this pandemic, and I think in navigating any crisis, gaining more knowledge and understanding is always the first step. And the next step is to really take a look at how we can help each other. The truth is, this pandemic has also revealed our vulnerabilities as a company, and we face a lot of challenges in many aspects of our business. But it has also humbled us and really made us focus on what is essential, which are our people, our customers, and our employees. Truly, COVID-19 is the great equalizer, rendering the future uncertain. But we are sincerely grateful to all of you for your continued patience and understanding in these times. Bayanihan has never been felt this strongly before. Trust that we will always do what we can to help keep the lights on in your homes and businesses. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. I hope and pray that we can all recover soon and emerge even more resilient, united, and re-energized. I would like to leave this Bible passage with all of you in Isaiah 40:31. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Thank you again, everyone. More power to you, your families, and your businesses, and stay safe and healthy always. God bless us all.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Cecil. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we officially end this morning's webinar. It has been very, very informative. We do hope to have this more often. So we are posting the link to the feedback form. If you guys could answer that, we would be very, very happy to get your feedback and insights. Please share us your thoughts and what type of topics you want to be seeing, and give some tips. This is of course going to go to the Meralco Corporate Business Group so that we can organize more special sessions for you guys. So again, if you have further specific questions, I know the time was very short, but you can, as Ms. Cecil mentioned, always directly contact your relationship managers. They can be of help. You can also visit the Meralco website. That is www.corporatepartners.meralco.com.ph. So thank you so much. This has been Danny Laurel, and this has been Meralco Power Up Talks webinar, and I hope you have a rest of the day full of safety and full of productivity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.